Now Disgraced Physician gets what's coming to him. Again. And again. And again. Thanks for killing my wife. This really happened to me, and due to the sensitive nature of it all, including court appearances, licensing ramifications of the accused, and just out of respect for the unnecessarily short life of my first, I will change all names and locations, and enough of the details that don't matter like what state, etc. so that privacy is kept. Either 10, 20, or 30 years ago, I married my high school sweetheart, Betty. I had just graduated high school, and she was staying in high school, pregnant with our first child Frankie at age 18-19. Throughout her pregnancy and our dating I was informed of Betty's condition of epilepsy. She had infrequent seizures, and I have seen her have a grand mal seizure twice before the incident, once while eating, and once on a family hike. The light flickering through the trees triggered it, we think. So later down the road we have our second child, living on our own in a trailer park in Bloxnart. My wife has always been a little bit punk, dyeing her hair many times over and over, and now having to shave her head as a result of her extremely damaged hair. She dyed what was left of her hair pink. She was a belly dancer, had a style of her own, and really had a don't F with me vibe she gave off to anybody but me and our two boys, Frankie and Sam. These aren't just nostalgic details, they are important to the slowly increasing plot. That being said, one afternoon while Betty is getting ready to drop the boys off at Grandma's to hit the mall, she had another seizure, a bad one. It's hard to be too descriptive without choking up right now, but she knew it was coming the second before. She hits the ground, I do my part to put her on her side and sweep the mouth. I know this is frowned upon now for some reason, but it's what her parents trained me to do. I call an ambulance, telling them help, my wife is having a grand mal seizure, a bad one. Whilst trying to instruct my frightened 3-year-old to go to mommy's bedroom, Sammy was hardcore napping at 11 months, literally I chess away. The ambulance shows up and takes her. I stay back because grandma isn't there yet for the kids. I called to make sure she'd be there soon, otherwise I'd have to drag the kids with me to the local hospital. Grandma gets there and I drive to the hospital as fast as possible. I get there pretty quick and talk to the doctor within a few minutes. The ER physician we'll call Dr. Thoro, steeped in irony, whose mercy I was at, told me that we're going to put her under to do a CAT scan MRI, something having nothing to do with her epilepsy. In my naivete, not understanding that I can tell him what I want him to do, I just said okay. I did tell him, however, that she had a seizure, has had seizures in the past, etc. He didn't believe that the seizure was epileptic in nature. He asked me about drugs she's taken, alcohol, etc. I told him no, she doesn't do that, but she did have a drink a couple of nights ago. He was super convinced, based on her appearance I presume, that this was drugs, and that she just needed to get it out of her system. Toxicology comes back. No drugs in system. Dr. Thoro says this doesn't test for all drugs out there. Wow, doc. So she's put under now, kept in that state. In the meanwhile, no EEG machine which measures brainwaves to determine that, yeah, she's having a seizure. Doomba, give her some phenobarb or whatever. I didn't know the importance of all this at the time, so we're just waiting for this test and that test and for her to come out of the underness or whatever. This takes a day and a half. They finally allow acquire an EEG machine, with an EEG tech, and come to find out I was right, that all along, she was having seizures. The entire time. Now she is brain dead. Now I'm signing DNRs and hospice, and neurologists are asking me about Buddhism, and if I've tried it. Nice try. So she died days later. Then something called 9/11 happened, which not only was 5 days after what would have been my wife's 23rd birthday, but exactly my 25th. Let's just say it was a rough year. My father-in-law tries to go to one of those law tigers with the case, but they say it needs to come from the husband. At first I don't want to go through this process, despite knowing that this mofo's arrogance caused my wife's demise. I eventually lawyer up, get referred to a great attorney on contingency, and begin the lawsuit process. Revenge is starting. Eeg, techs, hospitals, various entities involved in Betty's care, all separately settled out of court for unspecified amounts, well specified to me obviously. This is just the beginning of the revenge. Of all the entities that bowed out of the fight and handed over a check, this arrogant doc wasn't having it. He wanted a trial. He really wanted me to have to relive the pain I'd been going through the past couple years just to protect her name. We take it to court. Revenge by jury. 7-2 in favor of the plaintiff. Dr. Thoreau fell below the standard of care. Judgment for umpteen $1 million. Goodbye money. Civil suit done, enter fallout in the medical community. Ultimate revenge is that the doctor had his license suspended for a time, and didn't practice medicine for a long time. Then he tried her hand at different types of professions. Unemployable in the medical field. To this day. Dude, chick's broker than I ever was. 20th anniversary edit. So tomorrow will be 20 years since she died. I saw a meme on our emergency medicine that depicted, and made fun of a guy waiting for his or spouse in the waiting room, showing a dude with a beanie and sunglasses. I used this offense to decide to cross-post, not for clout, but for a cautionary tale for those docs who see what they think is an odd patient based on their or their spouse's attire. I got gaslighted and trolled by the medical community, and inundated with "I don't understand" type of comments. Nobody had a problem with clarity among you, us, laypersons. The arrogance continues. There was maybe one commenter who said something positive, but everything else was downvoting most of my comments. I just wanted to tell them what it looks like on the other side. Redditors' reactions, story 2 after. Redditor 1, this is unbelievable. I can't wrap my head around the amount of neglect and arrogance in this story. No amount of money can bring back your wife, but I'm happy to hear that justice was served. God bless you and your kids. Op answer, thank you so much for this. Yeah, I was so young at the time. It really took about a decade to process. When it first happened, hospice talked me into doing group therapy. It was just weird. 95% of the people there who were widowers were at least 20 years older than me naturally. I just couldn't find a way to connect with them. So many of them said the most insulting, hurtful stuff unintentionally, like try living with your wife an entire lifetime and see how much you miss her. I'm like thinking, dude, really, old man? Just because I had the attention of the room for 10 minutes you want to pee in my Cheerios? I realized that group therapy was a joke and just a competition for the saddest story. I mean, I won that hands down. But that's a competition you don't want to win. It was so, just awkward. I was working as a cashier at the time along with my other job, Escalate, and the other cashiers would send down potential dates for me in my line, like it's speed dating, but I'm ringing up their groceries. So weird. I so wasn't ready for that. I have an amazing wife now that stood through all of this. Me having to relive the trauma and describe this to a jury after I had just started moving past it all a year prior and was moving on. Redditor 2, dude, I'm really sorry about all this, man. Redditor 3, I'm so sorry. This is heartbreaking. Thank you for withstanding the re-traumatization for years and years to go after each and every one of these assholes and hold them accountable, especially the doctor who could have actually listened to you but instead allowed your wife to die. By putting her out of practice you saved who knows how many other lives and families. Wishing you peace and hoping your boys are well and remember their mama with love. Story 2. Tifu by catching my boss cheating on his wife. My boss M has been a co-owner of our franchise for about 5 years. His wife E is our office manager. They have 2 kids, one being barely a year old. It's just 3 other people in the office. Me, and 2 female co-workers, A and R. Thursday afternoon while A was on lunch, I went to ask my boss about something, and I instead found him making out with R in his office. He had his hands wrapped around her waist, grabbing her BTT, and her arms were around his neck. They immediately pulled back and tried to play it off. The next day, my husband and I had to stay home because he was exposed to someone with COVID, and we were both ill. I messaged E and told her we needed to talk in person, but she said she's out of town until next week and to call her, so I did. I told E about what happened, and she was in shock. M called my phone a few hours later while I was in the shower, and my husband answered. M asked that I call him back, but I couldn't bring myself to do it because of how bad my nerves and anxiety were after everything that happened. Today, I went to check my work email to see what was on the agenda for Monday. I was locked out. Tried to log into our scheduling website, and I couldn't get in there either. I messaged M, and he said I was no longer employed because of excessive absences even though termination would be the 3rd offense, and this was the 1st. I work in an at-will, right-to-work state so now I can't even do anything about it. DR caught my boss cheating on his wife, my manager, with a co-worker. Told the wife and now I'm fired for a completely unrelated reason. Can't do anything about it. Edit, I did already contact a lawyer, minutes after I found out I was terminated. They said there's basically nothing I can do. Edit 2. A lot of people are mad I made their marriage my business, but when an affair is happening 10 feet from my desk in an office I'm in 40 hours a week and I work with all 3 of the people involved. That's my business now. I didn't ask to walk in on them. It's just happened. Maybe people shouldn't conduct their affairs where they work. But that's too hard for some of you to wrap your minds around. Story 3. Terrible boss gets his comeuppance. Names have been changed and locations obfuscated to protect all parties, etc. Setting, high-volume independent tire shop in northern New England, circa 2012. We'll call it 123 Tire. Target, evil general manager. We'll call him J. Aggrieved parties, basically everybody that worked there at the time, but mainly myself and the receptionist. We'll call her Ruth. Backstory. So Jay had been the GM of 123 Tire since he got the previous GM fired in 2004. He was a complete narcissist who believed he could do no wrong, and if you didn't agree with him, God help you. Over the years, Jay had done a number of illegal things. For example, he was always very physical with his employees. One time, he was wrestling with another salesman. This was commonplace and unavoidable if you valued your job, and the salesman, we'll call him Paul, took a bad fall and broke his knee. In order to avoid the ire of the owner, we'll call him Lou, Jay immediately clocked Paul out and told him to go to the hospital. He also told Paul to use his own insurance, and that the company would pay the deductible in order to avoid a messy workers' comp claim. Paul did as he was told and kept his job, But his knee was never the same and he ended up addicted to opioids thanks to Jay's actions. Jay also had an affinity for the ladies. Now I must mention here that Jay is an ultra-conservative Christian father of 11 children, who believes that a woman's place is uneducated, barefoot, pregnant, and in the kitchen. That being said, several female receptionists came and went over the years with only Ruth sticking around because she needed the money and begrudgingly accepted the regular sexual harassment. When he wasn't behaving inappropriately with every lady that walked in the door, he was behaving inappropriately with every other employee. Want to leave early on a slow day? Wrestle the biggest guy in the shop for it. Jay was big on wrestling. I suspected Jay may also have been wrestling with his daughters, but couldn't prove it. The guy was a real creep. Big guy isn't in that day. Buy him a pizza. Trying to have lunch? Expect Jay to throw food at you. Want to schedule a vacation? Tough. He'll let you know the week before if you can take it. He was a complete child, and I put up with him for 6 long years because I couldn't let him win. The setting. It was the summer of 2012, and Ruth and I had had enough. Jay was completely out of control as usual, now telling me, a Latino, that if Obama won re-election, that he would make my work life hell come November. Ruth was going through a divorce, and he was trying to move in on her. For the record, Ruth hated Jay's guts. It was time to hit him where it hurt. Ruth was ready to drop a lawsuit for sexual harassment on Jay and 123 Tire, and I was ready to drop one for constructive discharge. Now suing an employer doesn't exactly look good on one's CV, but we were both at wit's end. The revenge. Ruth and I decided, one evening, that Jay's ultra-conservative values must be shared by his wife and family. As he was always working, his wife must be the one who goes to the mailbox every day. I created a throwaway email, and got him a Bill Me Later subscription to Hustler magazine. And Playboy. And Penthouse. Fast forward a couple of weeks, and he comes in looking like death warmed over. Turns out, Mrs. J didn't appreciate his new taste in reading material, and he's now living in a motel in the next town over. Now he's not saying that his wife kicked him out. He's far too much of a narcissist for that, but I could put 2 and 2 together. He's decided that he's done with his wife and 11 children, and that he is going to start a new life with Ruth. After all, her divorce is going to be finalized at the end of the week. It was at this point that Lou's sister, co-owner of 123 Tire and not a big fan of Jay, we'll call her Liz, overheard him talking to Ruth in a less than business appropriate manner. Liz later took Ruth aside and got the straight poop on what had been happening for the last several years, and that was that. The next morning, Lou called Jay to his office, and was far kinder than I would have been. Jay was to lose his title of GM, and go to work in another 123 Tire location an hour away until the end of the year. Beginning in 2013, Jay would need to find other employment. Jay was also not to contact the location that he had overseen and worked in for years. Also, the location that Jay was relocated to added an hour to his already hour-long commute. I suspect that Lou also encouraged Jay to reconcile with his wife, which Jay did. Epilogue. Jay ended his employment with 123 Tire in January of 2013, and never suspected any involvement from me. In fact, to this day, he stays in occasional contact with me. He went on to work for another tire store, this one a corporate chain, as a store manager. Put his house on the market, bought a new one closer to his new employer and everything. A year later he was fired after bringing a 7-figure lawsuit on them. They settled out of court, and he moved back to the house he was in before, as it hadn't sold. Jay's next job was 5 minutes from his home, and his new boss was the guy that Jay had gotten fired back in 2004. That one lasted a couple of years, until Jay gave up on finding employment in the area and moved himself and the whole family to the Midwest sometime around 2016. Now in the Midwest, Jay has been unable to keep a job in the car business for more than a year, and as soon as each of his kids turns 18, they seem to move right back to the area they grew up in. His New England home sold in 2019 for less than he bought it for. Ruth still works for 123 Tire, and is very happy there now. The icing on the cake. In early 2021, I finally left my job at 123 Tire, sold my house, and became a full-time RVer. I've seen 47 US states, including the Midwestern state and town that Jay now resides in. I looked him up when I got there, and he came to see me after he got out of work in my new RV. He said, "Boy, you must really think something of me to look me up and want to see me all the way out here." If he only knew the half of it. Redditor's reactions. Redditor 1, it's all the more beautiful that he doesn't know you did it and probably just blames everyone else for losing his job. The creep. Redditor 2, he's partly right though. You do think something of him. Nothing good, but something lol. Redditor 3, as I was getting ready to leave a job one time years ago, I told my supervisor that I wanted to let him know that working for him had helped me out tremendously and I had learned so much working under him. He grinned from ear to ear telling me how much he appreciated me telling him that. Funny thing was I never said how he'd helped or what I had learned. He just assumed I meant positive things. Redditor 4, this more than petty revenge as it is actual revenge and I'm immensely proud of. Way to go. Redditor 5, tell me he's living in a double wide and helping with homeschooling his tribe. Answer, I can't comment on the housing situation as he insisted on coming to me. There are no public homeowner records of him in the area he is now in, so I have to assume that he's renting. As for the child education situation, he and his wife are most definitely homeschooling their kids. Redditor 6, I wonder just how much the state is going to pay to take care of those kids and their mother now. My cousin, his wife's sister, is suddenly single after 20 years of marriage, and she has 14 kids. State is on the hook. Guy had a heart attack, age 45, either minimal or no life insurance. Answer, as stated in the post, Jay did reconcile with his wife. Sorry to hear about your cousin, that's so sad. Redditor 7, G, why didn't you fan the flames even more with subscriptions to stand corrected? And out. Magazines? There are probably newsletters for Furbies too. Answer, the thought actually crossed my mind at the time, but as the father of 11 children and a self-proclaimed Christian, I thought his wife would find Hustler et al. Sufficiently offensive without it looking too much like a prank.